Senator Thorp.
Thank you very much, Miss Acting, Madam Acting, it is, it's terrible, Acting Deputy President. Now, on the 7th of September last year, the Australian people went to the election and they voted. And I'm grateful, as I'm sure everyone is in here, that we live in a democracy where that could occur. And the people who voted made their decision based on what they'd been told by all the different candidates and political parties that were there and made themselves available. They decided in the majority to support the current government, the coalition government that we have today. And that's fair enough. They voted. That's what they got. But what really sticks in my craw, Madam Acting Deputy President, is the fact that those people were treated like mugs. Because those people opposite didn't stand up and say, we're going to the election to get a mandate to cut spending in Australia. They didn't say that. They didn't say that. What they said was, and I'm quoting, and I'm assuming that those opposites support the comments made by their leader, no surprises, no excuses. No new taxes, no changes to pensions, no cuts to the ABC or the SBS, no cuts to health or education. So when the Australian people cast their vote on the 7th of September last year, they did so trusting that those opposite and in the other place meant what they said. They did so confident that there would be no surprises, no excuses, no cuts, no new taxes, no changes to pensions, and confidently cast their vote that that would be the outcome. But unfortunately, that's not what they got. And Senator Seselja, who has just left the place, said in his contribution, people know and people understand what the task of this government is. If he's so confident, and others opposite are so confident, that that was an honourable task and a task that needed to be done, why not have the courage to say so before the election? Why not tell the Australian people, we believe there's a budget emergency, and when we come in, we're going to cut your pension. We're going to cut all the funding we promised to improve education in Australia. We're going to cut funding to public health. We're going to hit you with an extra fee every time you go to the doctor. We're going to dismantle universal health care. They didn't say that. I got an email today from a constituent who is in shock, I think, but this is her plea. A lady from Cygnet in Tasmania. I won't use her name, Madam Acting Deputy President, because she didn't give me her permission, but she says, when prioritising what to object to in the budget, please put the cruel cuts to the support for young people before petrol tax, co-payments to doctors or the debt levy. My son has a severe learning difficulty, was on New Start for several years, but got specialised job search help. Heard of Youth Connections? He got a casual job through a family connection, and then his job search people approached the employer and offered 3 months full wages or 6 months half wages if they hired him full time. They did, and he's still working there 5 years on. He was living in Sydney on his New Start money until things fell into place for him. There are dozens of kids like him, with and without qualifications, who need extra help to find work and something to live on until they do get a job. Don't know how they're going to do it if they can't get it for 6 months. Without the support he got, my son would probably still be living at home in rural Tasmania, others would be living on the street. There are many bad things in this budget, but this is the worst of them, plus the other disincentives to young people. I do not at all appreciate the prospect of the age pension becoming just as inadequate as New Start once the indexing is changed, but I think the attack on youth is the worst feature of this budget. And it is a budget that is a vicious attack on both Middle Australia and a vicious attack on the poor. It's a budget that's going to hit Australians every time they go and see a doctor, every time they get in a car. It's going to hit their local schools, it's going to hit their local hospitals, it'll hit them when their kids want to go to university, and it'll hit them when they want to access a pension. And the worst of it, Madam Deputy President, is the current Prime Minister said he would not do these things. It is just the most blatant dishonesty and treats the voters of Australia with just breathtaking contempt. We know that families are going to get slugged. Family benefits and parenting payments are going to get slashed at the same time. They're going to be hit with a new GP tax and a new fuel tax. Families on tax benefit Part B, Family Tax Benefit Part B, will now have their payment cut completely when their youngest child turns 6, and if their total household income is greater than $100,000 a year. Currently, eligible families continue to receive Family Tax Benefit Part B until their youngest child turns 16. This actually leaves families in this situation $2,268 worse off a year. No changes to benefits, we heard. The budget freezes the rates and thresholds for family tax benefits, including the income threshold to receive for the maximum rate of Family Tax Benefit A, $48,837, and confirms the abolition of the school kids bonus. How callous. Eligible families losing $400 per year for primary aged children and $820 a year for secondary aged children. Family tax benefit supplements also going to be dramatically reduced. That's going to cost some families more than $300 a year. But what did Labor do for families? What did Labor do for families? Because we get the pressure of the cost of living. We gave them support. Record levels of assistance for low and middle income families at the time when they need it most. In government, Labor provided targeted support to help ease the cost of living on families through tax cuts worth up to $2,000 a year, increased family payments worth $4,000 a year, increased the childcare rebate by 50%, brought in the new school kids bonus worth $820 per year per child, and put in the first proper national paid parental leave scheme. That's what Labor thinks of families. They support them. And remember the pensions. And I quote, once again, our new leader, saying clearly on the television, you couldn't turn around without hearing him say, no changes to pensions. About the longest sentence that man seems capable of speaking. No changes to pensions, stop the boats, blah, blah, blah. He didn't tell the truth, and that's becoming patently obvious. This budget slashes the current fair indexation system, which makes sure the pension keeps pace with the cost of living, and is going to be indexed by CPI alone, which we know means pensions will fall behind cost of living. It also intends to increase the pension age. The current Prime Minister has no mandate for these changes. How can you have a mandate to make such fundamental changes to the pension when you told the people of Australia there will be no changes to pensions? He treats the Australian people like mugs. Tell them anything. Get their vote, and then we can do what we like. It's abominable. I hope pensioners really are listening to what this government thinks of them. I personally believe they will never vote for this current leader again. On top of this, all pensioners and state senior card holders are set to lose valuable concessions for public transport and utilities with the abolition of the National Partnership on certain concessions for pensioners' concession card and seniors card holders. What did Labor do? In exactly the same space, we delivered a strong and sustainable pension system that ensured the pension keeps pace with the rising cost of living and targeted to those who need it most. Labor can think long term. This is why all those years ago, Labor made sure that most, if not all, Australians had access to working Australians had access to superannuation. This government has already scrapped the low-income superannuation contribution, and it's now going to delay the introduction of the superannuation guarantee to 12%. Labor committed to increasing the superannuation of Australia's low and middle income workers by introducing the superannuation guarantee rate to increase each year until it reached 12% on 1/9/2019. This is sensible policy. And they also abolished the maximum age limit on the superannuation guarantee from 1 July 2013 to increase the incentive for workers aged 70 and over to remain in the workforce and further boost retirement savings. It also amended the eligibility criteria for the low-income superannuation contribution to now pay individuals with an entitlement below $20. It effectively refunds up to $500 a year the tax paid on superannuation concessional contributions with incomes of up to $37,000 per year, the people who need it most. And then carers. More broken promises. Labor's always recognised the significant role that carers play in our community. We provided booster payments of up to $5,300 a year and a new annual $600 carer supplement on top of that. And of course, we've got the NDIS. What has the Liberal budget done? It's cut the indexation arrangements for the carer payment from September 2017. It's shameful. It's cut the National Respite for Carers program, which provides much-needed relief to people caring for loved ones at home who are unable to care for themselves because of disability or frailty. More than 90% of carers on the carer payment have no other income because of their caring responsibilities. And may I remind people, one of the other mantras of the now Prime Minister, no cuts to health. What did Labor do with health? Unprecedented investments, strengthening Medicare, hospitals, specialist service, and historic reforms to improving the delivery of primary health care across the country. What Labor managed to achieve was the highest bulk billing rates in Medicare's history, greater than 82% nationally. Increases in the workforce, over 14,000 more doctors and over 28,000 more nurses. And since, that doesn't follow, between 2008 and 2018, that growth is expected to slow. In the first 2 months of commencement, over 84,000 children had free dental services under Labor's Grow Up Smiling program. But what do we get now? What do we get now? This budget's GP tax is a cruel, broken promise. Remember, no cuts to health, and represents the greatest attack on Medicare and universal health care in years. This budget will also see the cost of medicines rise to $42.70 for general patients, and for concessional patients the cost will be $6.90. Patients will also be lumped with paying a new tax on GP visits, paying for pathology and imaging, and find it harder to get those services they need from public hospitals. It also makes the Medicare safety net less fair, cutting $270 million from the provision existing arrangements and transferring those costs onto Australian families. Then we get to housing and homelessness. Now, people understand the pressures on housing fall across a continuum. If you don't have people being able to get into private homes, being able to afford to buy their own home, then they have to rent. If rents are high and they can't afford to get into private rental, then they need to get into public housing. If public housing hasn't got the scope to look after them, then they fall back on emergency and crisis housing, and of course the worst end of the spectrum is homelessness. That is a fact. So if at any point, as a former housing minister, I saw the benefit of NRAS in Tasmania, it made an extraordinary difference. As a former housing minister, I saw the benefits of NRAS in my state of Tasmania. We've already had 14,000 dwellings completed. People need to go through, people need to understand that good schemes, long-term thinking, planning requires things need to start, build momentum and that to get to fruition. And that is why, and now you're going to cut one of the best policies when it came to providing affordable housing in Australia. It is an absolute disgrace, And those opposite may bleep, but I do understand your embarrassment. I understand your embarrassment because you got elected on a con. You said that there would be no surprises, no excuses, no cuts to education, no cuts to health, no changes to pensions, and you conned the voters. Oh dear.
Senator Mason.
Oh, very upset, are you?
Senator Mason.
What else are you going to do about housing? You're going to cut $44 million to homelessness services. How kind and caring that is. You're going to axe housing help for the seniors program. So poor old pensioners got less money and less houses to live in now. Oh, then let's remind everyone opposite also what they said about cessation of the first owner savings account.
Order. Thank you. Senator Polly.
Yes, Madam Acting Deputy President, my point of order is that as much as we're all very cognizant that those on the other side don't share the views, they're not shamed by the budget they brought down, those sort of outbursts, I can't even hear Senator Thorp. So I'd ask you to bring the chamber to order.
Yes, thank you, Senator Polly, and Senator Mason, I do ask you to restrain from shouting across the chamber. It is unparliamentary.
I apologise. I was just asking a question. When the honourable senator would pay back the debt.
Thank you.
We haven't heard an answer.
Thank you. It is not an appropriate question. Thank you, Senator Mason. Senator Thorpe.
President. So, what are they doing now? Having broken all those promises made pre-election and conned the Australian people into believing that they were getting what they voted for, they've now manufactured a budget crisis, a budget emergency. And yet, that's not what the experts say. All the chief economists say that Australia has an enviable budgetary position compared to other rich countries. And none thought the speculated deficit levy was an intelligent way to repair the budget. The Bank of America's Merrill Lynch chief economist said it's important to get the deficit under control in the longer term, but serious risks involved in moving too quickly. The economy is still fairly soft. Growth is going below trend. I don't see any particular urgency about 2014-15, 2015-16. One of the most recent figures, the Australian government's debt of $191.5 billion, forecast to rise to more than $600 billion. I'm recognising the figures here. The forecast deficit is $47 billion, but all economists say these figures were tiny compared with other OECD countries as a percentage of the overall economy. Our position was enviable.
Order,
Most
Senator.
countries would be
Senator
envious
Mason.
of Australia's public finances as they currently stand. We don't need a surplus tomorrow, said Chris Richardson, economist and partner at Deloitte Access Economics. So what we have is a series of untruthful statements made leading into the election and then a confected budget crisis post-election to con the Australian public. How about if you want to make a tough decision, you don't make it on the backs of the poor.
Senator
You
Mason.
don't make it on the backs of the
Senator
sick.
Mason.
You don't make it on the backs of pensioners.
Senator
How about you do a
Mason.
few things like abolish negative gearing? How about you get rid of capital gains tax discounts? You wouldn't know how to make a tough decision if it stared you in the face. Dishonesty before the election and dishonesty after it.
Thank you, Senator Thorpe.